Okay, are we ready to start? Okay, I'd like to call the board meeting together. Secretary Montoya, could you do a roll call, please?
Of course. Chair Wright,
Here.
Board Member Bartholow, here. Vice Chair Noni.
Here.
Yeah, let the record reflect that all board members are present.
Okay. Remote participation is not needed today. We are now taking public comment on items 3. Public comment. You're in the room. Please rise. Please raise your hand and wait to be called on. And the timer person will appear on the screen. And will appear on the screen. Oh, we have a speaker.
Thank you. Janice Carmen.
One moment, please. Just want to make sure that everybody, that the board is in view. Let me get the timer ready for you.
Well, okay, Janice Carmen. While I'm waiting and thinking, I was thinking it's a city situation that's concerning me, but it may actually be running into the county as well. And this is that I became more and more involved with the water. My husband was a 17-year veteran of the Sonoma County Water Agency. After that, he was in Saudi Arabia working for 2 years. And then we also went to Indonesia and worked on water projects there. And I've always been interested in water. And I grew up along the creek. And the creek happens to be across the street from a recently approved project, which a lot of us didn't know, Lagos Fresca. And it doesn't appear that it went to waterways. And when I went to the waterways meeting, I think it was last year before the fall, I talked about a waterways problem, and they said, well, do you have a waterway near you? Because there's a legal project that's near me that started me on the city wanting information. And I said, yes, the waterway runs alongside my house, and it's full, and there's all kinds of creeks in the mountains, etc. But what I'm talking about today is I went to the waterways meeting last week, and it was very disconcerting, to say the least. They talked about dropping the meeting except in emergency or needed circumstances. I had been questioning, at what point did Lagos Frescas, Frescas Lagos, I hate the name, Spanish name, hard to remember for me. When did it go to waterways so that somebody could be commenting on this situation, because it is on a floodplain and it's only 100 feet or so from the creek, and the creek is running right now. And the person that lives in the property that my parents owned back from the 40s and I grew up on that creek, the cul-de-sac, the culvert can back up, and they're worried about it flooding, a second time. So I'm just bringing up this waterway situation, but the reason why I said it could be involved with the county also, because somebody else was doing a well during moratorium. And I went to the city, wasted 3 hours of my time at the city trying to find out what to do about this illegal well. And they sent me to the county. And when I went to the county said, well, we don't know, what. And then later, the city told me that all the wells were under the county now. So I'm just saying that you can see how the confusion can go with something that you think is being taken care of as a citizen. And it never got answered about when this project ever went to waterways. And now the meetings have been eliminated. They're not even making quarterly meetings. And
Thank you for your comment.
That's it. I just want to tell you, it's very confusing and very difficult. And maybe a bigger process sometime.
Okay, Director Burke, could you introduce item 4.1 to us? Thank you.
Yes. So the only item before the subcommittee today is the Santa Rosa Water fiscal year 26-27 water, wastewater, regional, and stormwater and creeks budget overview. And presenting today, we will have Nick Harvey, our Deputy Director of Water Administration, and Liz Hanley, our Supervising Engineer over Asset Management.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Director Burke mentioned, my name is Nick Harvey, Deputy Director of Administration with Santa Rosa Water, and we're here today to talk to you about our preliminary fiscal year 26-27 water, wastewater, regional reuse, and stormwater and creeks policy, O&M, and CIP budget review. So in the last couple of years, we've done 3 meetings. We did 1 meeting that was very preliminary budgetary assumptions, some policy overview. Then the second meeting was, the last couple of years, the second meeting was preliminary budget information, and then we convened for a third time the last couple of years to ask you guys for your formal recommendation of the budget package to the full board. We're kind of combining the policy and preliminary budget review for this meeting, hoping to only meet twice. The first thing I'd like to point out is this is very much preliminary budget. We just finished citywide budget entry. I believe screens closed last week. Jennifer and I, or Director Burke and I, are very heavily involved in reviewing some of the budgetary assumptions, and so there's a good chance that some of these numbers will shift, especially with regard to the general fund portion of the stormwater and creeks enterprise, which I will touch on a little later in the presentation. And with that, we'll get started. For our agenda today, we'll start with the enterprise funding and overall policy review, kind of an overview about how each of our enterprises collects revenues and the policies that they adhere to. We'll go over some assumptions used in developing the 26-27 preliminary budget. We'll get into the budgetary proposals for all of our enterprises, and then I will hand it over to Liz, who will talk to you all about our preliminary CIP funding plan with this budget package and some project highlights, and then we'll finish off by reviewing the planned budget schedule for the rest of the adoption process. So in terms of water enterprise funding, for fiscal year 24-25, or the most recently completed fiscal year, we were funded by approximately $52.1 million in rate revenues, collected over about 54,000 water accounts. We have usage and fixed rates for water with varied tiers, or tier 1, tier 2, or as we commonly refer to, indoor and outdoor water use, because of the way we use our sewer capping process to delineate between the 2 tiers, or indoor and outdoor water use. We generated $3.1 million in demand fee and miscellaneous fee revenues for the year. For a wastewater enterprise, last year we were funded by approximately $74.4 million in total rate revenues, over 50,000 sewer accounts. We have quite a few users that are about 4,000 users that are on septic or other sewer systems. So we do have less sewer accounts than we do water accounts. Again, sewer is also funded using a mixture of usage and fixed rates. And we only charge 1 tier for our sewer rates, with some variability, mostly applicable to commercial enterprises that vary the rate based on the strength of discharge. For last year, we collected $4.7 million in demand fees, South Park sanitation maintenance fees, and miscellaneous fees in the wastewater enterprise. Regional water reuse funding, it's funded by our 5 partner agencies. We allocate our operating costs based on flows every year. Debt service payments are calculated based on what debt and when debt was incurred and what type of project. Certain agencies may or may not participate entirely or to the same extent as other agencies, given what a project is used or how a project is funded. CIP costs are distributed per the Master Subregional Partner Agreement, and reminder, Santa Rosa's share of the regional enterprise allocation is funded by our local wastewater fund. I think that's pretty well illustrated with some graphics later on in the presentation that I'll point out. Our stormwater enterprise was created in 1996 to comply with MPDES permitting requirements for stormwater runoff and to reduce flooding, property damage, and stormwater degradation in the city. We collect revenues for the stormwater enterprise via an annual parcel assessment for creek restoration, water quality improvement, and drainage improvements. That's placed on the county's tax roll every year. The stormwater assessment, we charge per ERU or equivalent residential unit fee based on the type of parcel, and that's added to the property tax roll every year. There is some supplemental funding provided by the city's general fund, which is increasingly limited, and the capital improvement program supplements the stormwater and creeks enterprise funding with several special revenue funds throughout the city, including capital facilities fees, gas tax, various grants through CIP projects. The stormwater assessment is used to fund regulatory compliance for the stormwater and creeks program. The funding is insufficient for infrastructure improvements, which is why we utilize both general fund monies to fund portions of the stormwater and creeks enterprise, and also why those special revenue funds come into play. The funding split for their revenues is that approximately 47% of their revenues are allocated to stormwater enterprise and 53% go to creeks. The annual escalator is based on the consumer price index. So each year that the per equivalent unit or per ERU assessment price that's added to the property tax rolls is escalated by the Bay Area Consumer Price Index. And for the current fiscal year, 25-26, we're currently billing $42.46 per equivalent residential unit on the property tax rolls. So in terms of some regulatory requirements that govern what we do, water and sewer ratepayer funding is governed by Prop 218, which states, among several things, that we may not intermingle funds between enterprises. We may not subsidize customers. You may be familiar with that concept because when we talk about H2O program, we're always talking about how we're limited on revenues with that program because we cannot subsidize customer bills using ratepayer revenues. So we have to get a little creative, so to speak, and we use lease revenues or non-rate revenues to fund that program. We must charge a cost for services. So every 5 years or so, we go out for the rate study or cost of service study. That's to meet the Prop 218 requirements of showing a nexus with between what we're charging customers and what it costs to deliver the services. And the rates are approved through a public hearing process. April 1st last year, you'll probably remember we had our next 5 years of rates approved at City Council through a public hearing. Regional funding, Santa Rosa again pays from our sewer ratepayer funds, and the funding scheme and allocation is governed by the Master Subregional Agreement. And for stormwater funding, it's allowed for both stormwater and creeks, and a vote would be required to increase, to escalate that charge by any means other than the approved consumer price index methodology that we're currently using. Looking at some basic assumptions we used to develop the budget this year, we're expecting water deliveries to increase approximately 1.1%, and that's based on the growth assumptions that were used in the rate modeling that we performed with our consultant. We're assuming that wastewater use will remain flat, which is kind of a byproduct of sewer capping. The numbers tend to not fluctuate a whole lot on the demand side. We are seeing development slowing somewhat, and that's evident when you look at our demand fee revenues. So we have water and sewer demand fee revenues that each feed those revenues into the operating funds to support expenditures in each of those departments. And we've seen those numbers drop fairly precipitously over the last year or two. So we're keeping an eye on that. And we're going to continue increasing our rates per the proposed 5-year rate schedule. So for fiscal year 26-27, that's going to be 6% on water usage and fixed and 5% on sewer usage and fixed charges. And as you recall, the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years, I can't remember of rates, before we adopted the current rate plan, we had done away with the wholesale pass-through because we thought Sonoma Water was going to be fairly consistent and predictable with their increases. We've seen that's not the case. We've seen a lot more volatility the last few years. So this year will be the first year we're going back to the wholesale rate pass-through. And we'll be talking to you all about that on Thursday at the board meeting. So general expenditure increases we're seeing department-wide is salaries. Current MOUs call for a 4% salary increase for all staff starting July 1, 2026. Unlike the last couple of years, we're seeing no reclassifications or new position requests with this year's budget, so a few less moving parts there. We're continuing to see increases in electricity and the water purchase budget, two of the main drivers of operating costs in the department. I'll touch on some more detail on the electricity and the water purchase budgets in later slides. But our internal overhead is also up. And that's basically what we pay for central services provided citywide. So city attorney's office, human resources, accounts payable, payroll, all those central functions. They're seeing costs go up every year like everybody else, and naturally our allocations of those costs are going up as well in lockstep. Operations and maintenance projects are up in local wastewater, down in other funds, and I'll give a little more explanation as to why that is in some upcoming slides here. So looking high level at the overall O&M budget increases for our enterprises, we're looking at 6.8% on the water fund, which isn't bad considering we're putting through 6% rate increases. So we're seeing that our budget requests are relatively in line with what we expect our increase in revenues to be. Wastewater fund is virtually flat. It's a little less than 1% at this point. And the regional reuse fund is up only 3% preliminarily. Stormwater and Creeks has also done a good job at limiting their increases. They've held their preliminary increases to 1.1% increase, with 22.4% or $742,000 of their total budget requests funded by the general fund, and 2.5 million or 77, about 3/4 of their budget funded by their enterprise revenues. So it was requested last year that we show, what our total expenditures are department-wide in a pie chart. And so we've taken a stab at doing that here. Historically, we haven't included the regional enterprise in this because when we look at the effects on just Santa Rosa Water, if we look at the regional enterprise expenditures as a whole, we're also counting those impacts that are paid for by our partner agencies. And so what we've done is we've reconfigured this year to where we're showing the Santa Rosa regional contribution. So we're only showing the cash outlay attributable to Santa Rosa for our portion of the regional enterprise. As you can see, that's $58 million, and that's actually a little over 1/3 of our total funding request of $170 million. We're also continuing to see the same themes in that the capital program, our water purchase budget, and our people, our salaries and benefits, as well as our overhead make up the lion's share of our budget requests for the year. So water operations and maintenance budget request is up 6.8% over the current year preliminarily. Salaries are up almost 11% despite the 4% assumed increase based on contract increases. This is due to an increase in miscellaneous salaries anticipated due to some retirement and vacation sellback payouts that we're anticipating. Our O&M project budget in the water operations fund is down quite a bit. Our project budgets don't turn back to the fund like our other O&M line items. So we have quite healthy budgetary balances in our projects, and we're going to continue relying on those carryover funds in the coming year rather than providing new money to those keys. Professional services are increasing by 16% due to increasing well operating fees that we plan to pay to the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, as well as anticipated increases in the cost of background checks, employee onboarding, real estate, and surveying services for the enterprise. Our water billing costs are decreasing. You can see they're decreasing about $229,000. And this is us seeing the fruits of passing on the credit card transaction fees to our customers. We estimate it saved about $800,000 overall. And so really the $229,000 we're seeing of savings we're seeing in the water billing services line item is really attributable probably almost entirely to the credit card fees. So we're seeing that pay off pretty immediately. So that was a nice change to see. And our operational supplies requests are up to 13% for next year, mostly due to cost increases in the brass components needed to install and repair our fire hydrants. We've seen aggressive price increases in those items, so we're planning for that accordingly next year. The water purchase budget, as I mentioned earlier, we're assuming that our volume of water sold and therefore purchased is going to be up 1.1% due to growth assumptions in our financial planning related to our rate modeling. The Sonoma Water wholesale rate increase is 8.21%. And so that puts the wholesale price of water at $1,515 per acre foot. We project wholesale demand for the next year to be about 15,610 acre feet for a total budgeted cost of approximately $23.7 million for next year. And just FYI, the Sonoma Water Technical Advisory Committee met just yesterday and voted unanimously to approve the proposal. And so the full board will be seeing this in an item on Thursday prior to taking it to council on March 24th as well. So yeah, we'll be at full board this Thursday, the 5th. We'll be taking it to council on March 24th. And then I also wanted to touch on, because we're passing through the rate increase and the wholesale rate increase isn't the only item affecting our rate. We always like to do an analysis where we look at the average family of four's household water use and do an estimate of what we think the bill impacts will be to them. And so for the average household of four in the city of Santa Rosa, we're anticipating that the net effect of our 6% rate increase for items not affected by the Sonoma water increase, plus the 8.21% increase on the wholesale water rate, will yield about a 6.4% increase, or a $5.33 per month increase on the average family's water bill in the city of Santa Rosa. We will be touching on that again on Thursday as well. And so here's the visual look at the proposed water operations and maintenance budget. As you can see, purchase of water takes up almost half of the costs, with the remainder, the lion's share of the remainder being attributable to paying our staff and paying for the water department's internal administrative fund and the citywide overhead. Local wastewater operations budget is preliminarily set to increase by less than 1%. And so we budgetarily hedged against increasing personnel costs by achieving reductions in other categories. Obviously, if we're expecting 4% salaries and benefits increase when our bottom line is less than 4%, we've obviously made that up elsewhere. We're also seeing savings in the water billing category, just as we are in the water fund, again, attributable to reduced payment processing charges. And we're also seeing a nice reduction in insurance premiums. You can see that negative $59,000 reduction, which is a welcome change. Because you may remember last year we had a 75% one-year increase in this line item. So it's nice to see that go, correcting a little bit for next year. It's a pleasant surprise, to say the least. The miscellaneous category is seeing a nearly 9% reduction for next year, largely due to the fact that rental equipment and maintenance, rental equipment for the maintenance of the West College facility isn't being budgeted for next year. So in the current year, we budgeted quite a bit for rental pumps, equipment, and maintenance of the West College facility. Filled that back for next year, so that's why we're seeing that reduction in that line item. Here's a visual representation of the local wastewater operations and maintenance budget. Again, administrative and city overhead takes up a pretty large chunk of that, with the rest of it being water billing and paying for our employees. So it's always remarkable to me, and I think Director Burke and I were talking about this the other day, it's almost deceptive, because when you look at the wastewater or the local sewer operations and maintenance, it always looks like a really low number until you realize that this fund also, this is only the expenditures related to this enterprise. The lion's share of what comes out of this fund is actually paying that $58 million for next year for Santa Rosa's share of the regional enterprise. So While this number is pretty manageable, when you look at it in concert with our regional contributions, we take a pretty big hit on reserves every year to keep the local and regional enterprises fully funded. So our overall O&M budget increases in the regional operating fund have been hedged to just 3%, due in large part in the year-over-year reduction in requested funding for O&M projects. The regional O&M projects are currently holding significant carryover funding, so we're utilizing that rather than asking for more money next year. So we're helping save some there. Our biosolids section is driving a nearly 20% increase to the professional services category due to expected increases in the cost of biosolid land application and the cost of disposal with Listec. Vehicle replacement and maintenance is increasing based on garage guidance, as well as the need to increase vehicle replacement fund contributions to ensure that we have sufficient funding for future vehicle replacements. Utilities are increasing by 9% due to anticipated increased electricity demand and uncertainty around the utilization of our CHP engines, which when they're running help offset electricity demand, but there's been uncertainty in recent years. So we tried to consider that budgetarily for next year's electricity budget. And there's also currently a need to utilize higher UV doses with the current disinfection system, which requires more energy consumption. And so as you know, and you may remember, we've had significant year-over-year increases in the electricity budgets the past few years. But the good news is we're now seeing, under 10% increases when we had 30 to 50% increases there for a couple of years. So still an increase, but much more manageable than we've seen in recent years. And the $126,000 in capital outlay is intended for the regional enterprise's IPAC software upgrade, which is needed to automate and streamline many administrative and maintenance functions out of the treatment plants. And here's a look at the regional fund total expenditures. Again, this is representative of the entire regional budget request, not just Santa Rosa's portion. Obviously, because we're requesting $78.5 million, Santa Rosa is contributing about 58 of that. Again, people are the largest slice of the pie. Debt service is relatively flat this year, $18.3 million. We've upped the cash funded CIP, the $1 million a year increase in that. We're up to $13 million for next fiscal year. And we always like to point out the miscellaneous revenue number. This number has, it's shown as a negative too, because since we only ask Santa Rosa and the other regional partner agencies to contribute to costs on a net basis, meaning we take all the costs, we subtract the revenues, and we're only asking the partners to contribute the difference between those two figures. Thanks in large part to the success of our truck waste program, we've significantly increased our revenue estimates next year. So that $8.4 million miscellaneous revenues is really helping us to hedge our requested increases in contributions to the enterprise. So we always like to point that out. Okay, so in the water and local wastewater, local sewer enterprises, we have undesignated fund balance. In regional, we call that the refund reserve. Reason being is, in the local enterprises, Santa Rosa owns the entirety of those reserve balances, and it's entirely our discretion as to how we spend those monies or how we apply those monies. The refund reserve holds monies that are turned back from each of the partner agencies. So we take the turn back like we do in the other enterprises, we allocate it to the partners, and it sits on the trial balance in this refund reserve. As you can see, 2 years ago, we turned back $5.9 million. The turn back for the fiscal year in June 30, 2025 added almost $7.5 million to that. So we're almost at $16.3 million total refund reserve balance. And I'll have, you'll be seeing an item at board meeting on Thursday talking about some plans with some of this money that we discussed with the regional partner agencies at Subcommittee. And we will also touch on some, shortly here, I'll be making some comments on the reserve levels in all of our enterprises. So we'll come back to Looking at the regional partner allocations for 26-27, you can see we're about 1% year over year on the total funding request. Again, that's helped by our debt service staying relatively flat compared to last year, as well as the dramatically increased revenues offsetting a lot of our expenditures. So we're preliminarily only requesting about a 1% increase on the overall costs that we're looking to collect for the enterprise. And due to the flows, Cotati's proposed allocation is actually going down about 1%. So that'll be good news for them. But again, as I spoke to earlier, this is very much a preliminary budget. We're going to be looking at these numbers a lot more closely in the coming weeks. And I wouldn't be terribly surprised if these numbers went up a little bit. But just wanted to let you know, but it's looking pretty good overall. So I wanted to touch on the bond issuance. We had included this in the financial planning for our rate study process. We were planning a $35 million bond issuance to fund the electrical infrastructure replacement at LTP. The assumption has been built into our financial modeling, assuming a 30-year amortization period at 5.5% interest, and the estimated debt service payments would be about $2.6 million per year, adding those estimated amounts at the bottom on an annual basis to each agency's allocation, debt service allocation. So we had originally planned to go off this debt issuance in the current fiscal year, but what's happened throughout the life of or at the beginning of the electrical infrastructure replacement project is that we found that the specialty equipment, the load banks, all the specialty manufactured electrical equipment is long lead time. I believe it's 2 to 3 years. And when you issue bonds, there's IRS regulations saying that you need to spend the bond principal within approximately 3 years, or else you can run afoul of some of the regulations, and there could be penalties associated with that. So we're holding off on this because we were able to find the money to execute the purchase of that equipment. We're going to be monitoring to see when we anticipate the construction phase starting, so that we can time the cash flows closer to that date, which buys us more time for that 3-year period. And it also helps us out because we're not having $35 million sitting in the bank that we're not using and having to pay all that interest on. So we're trying to be strategic, working with finance to determine the best timing for this. And we'll, of course, keep you all apprised as we move forward with the bonding process. So here's a look at our operating fund reserves as of June 30, 2025. The water enterprise. So first of all, as you know, per our current reserve policy, we set operating reserves at 15% of operations and maintenance costs each year. So that's $6.72 million and about $7 million in water, sewer, and regional respectively as of the end of last year. The catastrophic reserves have stayed static for several years at those same amounts. And water for the year turned back $5.8 million. Wastewater turned back $4.1 million. And as I just spoke to on the refund reserve slide, the regional enterprise added $7.5 million to that refund reserve. So we have $21.1 million, $18.8 million, and $16.3 million in the water, sewer, and regional enterprise reserves, respectively. And I wanted to touch on that because, as you know, we're always careful. You know, we're asking for more rates, saying we need more rates to save more money, but then our reserve balances are going up. So I wanted to take the opportunity here to talk to you a little bit about what we do have planned to manage these reserve balances. And so the first thing I'll point out on our local enterprises is that as part of the rate study, the rate consultant evaluated our catastrophic reserve balances and recommended that we add $11.7 million to the catastrophic reserve in water and $14.7 million to the catastrophic reserve in local sewer. So we're hoping to go in the next year and get those changes to our reserve policy executed, which would reduce those undesignated reserve balances by those amounts, helping us to manage those reserve levels. The refund reserve at $16.3 million. So the 2020 bonds, when we we issued those bonds in a highly inflationary environment. It was December 2020 when we issued, based on what we thought the UV disinfection system replacement would cost. But what we saw was we issued $70 million bond principal. By the time we went to award the construction contract, we were nearly $15 million short of what we needed. So as a stopgap, to enable us to proceed with awarding contracts on that project, we need to show that we had the appropriations. So what we did with finance, working with finance, is we provided over $10 million in transfer budget from the local wastewater enterprise to the regional enterprise to prop up those expenditure appropriations so that we could keep the project moving. But now we have $10 million of local sewer money earmarked to help pay for that project. But what we've decided to do, because finance is wanting to get away, because as soon as we start spending $1 of local sewer money, we've in a sense executed a loan from the local sewer enterprise to the regional enterprise, and that has an administrative burden attached to it. It becomes confusing, it's hard to track, and finance as a policy matter wants to get away from doing that. And so we spoke to the subtac members or regional partner agencies at our last meeting. And what we're doing, you'll see this, I believe it's on the consent calendar for Thursday's BPU meeting. We're actually requesting the board's recommendation that council authorize about $7.5 million in additional regional appropriations. But we'll do that so we'll ask you all to recommend that to council. March 24th, it'll go to council for the actual authorization of the appropriations. But what we won't do is we won't collect any more money from the regional partner agencies to fund that. And what it'll do is by the end of the year, it will net out of that refund reserve. So we think by the end of the year, based on that change, we'll have accreted approximately half that refund reserve balance, while ensuring that we're not causing any complicated accounting on the back end to get that project paid for. So it's kind of a win-win. We were able to give Mike and his team more money available to program and CIP funding, because we initially thought we were going to have to take some of the CIP appropriations and throw it at this project. But we're asking to backfill it with the reserve balance, essentially. So that's our plan, at least in the near term, to help manage those undesignated and refund reserve balances moving forward. And looking at the undesignated fund balance in water, there's the animation there. So for the current fiscal year 25-26, we have a $5.1 million deficit budget. For next year, we're proposing a $6.5 million deficit budget with $70.7 million in expenditures against $64.3 million in revenues. On the local wastewater side, for the current year, budgeted a $6.9 million deficit, and for next year, we're proposing a $6.9 million deficit, or $94.4 million of expenditures against $87.4 million of revenues. And just to again highlight just how profound the impact of paying for the regional enterprises on local sewer reserves, that gray stack bar on the far right represents the amount that's just Santa Rosa's regional enterprise contribution. So you can see that that's the biggest chunk out of local sewer reserves on an annual basis. So our stormwater and creeks operations and maintenance budget is only increasing 1.1% for next year, driven primarily by increased labor costs and hedged by large reductions in requested funding for professional services and vehicle costs. The large decrease in professional services is attributable to the fact that we're not paying for the EPIC pilot study next year. So that was a big year-over-year decrease in anticipated costs. And the new stormwater permit requirements have not yet been implemented, saving the enterprise professional services costs on compliance services. Vehicle maintenance is seeing a large reduction on the year as well due to current year actuals coming in much lower than anticipated. So we think we budgeted about double what we need for this year for vehicle maintenance. So we went ahead and carved that back in the vehicle replacement category, or the vehicle replacement and maintenance category for next year. Furthermore, the general fund portion of the stormwater and creeks budget request is only increasing by 1.9%, indicating that they've found significant cost offsets considering salaries are increasing 4%. So they've done a good job at really trying to keep those numbers down and stay in line with the citywide guidance for general fund dollars. And then one more thing I want to mention is that the city manager and the finance team are exploring the possibility of asking for further cuts to the general fund budget requests. And they're asking for suggestions that would equate to 1% and 3% reductions in general fund requests for next year's budget. This would equate to the 1% reduction in stormwater would equate to $7,600 in cuts, and the 3% would equate to $23,000 reduction in general fund budget for next year. And so Director Burke and I are going to be working closely with Stormwater and Creeks team to come up with those cut proposals. Ultimately, we're not sure if we can even find that much to save, or even if we can, whether it will be ultimately implemented, but we'll certainly keep you apprised with development from the general fund as we go along. And the total stormwater and creeks operations and maintenance budget for the year is $3.3 million, with the bulk of that going towards paying our staff. And since we looked at the reserve levels on the other enterprises, figured we'd talk about it on the stormwater and creeks enterprise as well as of June 30, 2025. So as of year end, the 1671 of the stormwater enterprise undesignated fund balance is $728,000, or a reduction in almost $10,000. And then the 1672 or the stormwater creek restoration fund, that undesignated fund balance ended the year at about $1.25 million, or a reduction over the previous year of approximately $107,000. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Liz Hanley, the supervising engineer of Water's asset management team, and she'll go over our CIP funding plan for the year and talk about some project highlights.
Thank you, Nick. So here we have a high-level summary of what we're proposing to fund for the different funds. For water, $16 million, wastewater 14.7, regional 13 million, and stormwater and creeks about 1.7 million. And we'll take a more detailed look at that over the coming slides here. So as I mentioned, water, we are budgeting 16 million. That is up from 15.5 million from last year. You can see that our reservoir projects are our biggest chunk of funding there at 37%, followed by our water mains and services at 21%. Our groundwater projects come in at 15%, and our water master plan studies and miscellaneous category is at 14%. And lastly, our pump stations are at 13%. For our local wastewater fund, we are budgeting 14.7 million. This is up from 14.3 million last year. Our sewer main and replacement projects are our biggest funding amount there at 51%, followed by our sewer trunks at 38%. Our master plan studies and miscellaneous category at 10%, and our lift stations facility funding actually comes in at 0.3%. For regional, we are budgeting 13 million this fiscal year, which is up from 12 million last year. Plant infrastructure projects make up most of our funding at 81%, followed by the master planning category at 12%, and our reuse infrastructure projects at 8%. Here we have our stormwater fund, which is 1.7 million. This is actually down from last year, where we funded 3.4 million. Our master plan studies and miscellaneous category is at 51% of our funding, followed by storm drain projects at 35%, and our creek projects at 14%. And here we have sort of an overview of the budget sheets that you have in front of you. So I'll just kind of give you a brief look at those in hopes that they'll help you understand and kind of read the sheets. On the far left of the sheet, your first column there is the line number. We often refer to that as we're speaking to specific projects, so we can refer to a specific number to help in discussions. And then to the right of that column, we have our PID or our project identification numbers and our IFIS or JL keys, and those are unique numbers and keys assigned to each project. To the right of that, we have a project title, which is a brief description of the project that's being funded. And then we have our funding type, which on the screen, you can see it kind of circled in purple there, and we have some descriptions of what the different funding types are down below for reference. The next purple circle up there gives a look at what what past funding and the amount that we expect to carry over into next year will be. And then most importantly is the column that's labeled request year one funding 26-27. That is the amount of funding that we're proposing for this coming fiscal year. Followed by that is year 2 through 5 projected funding, and then lastly a 5-year total on the last column there. And then on the next slide, this here is a list of the projects that we will give a brief highlight on. I won't read through all those because we're just going to jump into the slides, but that's kind of a summary of what we'll talk about. Our first project is from our groundwater program. This is PID 1997, our Carly and Peter Springs well rehab project. This project will replace the existing damaged and outdated Carly well facility and convert it into a full-time production well. The Peter Springs well will be separated out from the distribution system and converted to an irrigation well. And this project is also combining the work to abandon freeway well. The estimated project cost is $7.9 million. It's currently in design, and we hope that it will go to construction in year 3. Next, we have a project from our pump station and reservoir category. This is project ID 2212. It's phase 5 of our tank seismic upgrades and pump station improvements for various reservoirs and stations. The project will upgrade reservoirs R9A and R16 to current seismic codes standards and upgrade pump stations 16 and 17 to increase fire flow capacity and improve system resiliency. The estimated project cost is $15.4 million. It's currently in design, and it's going to go to construction in year 1. Next, we have one of our water and sewer main replacement projects. This is PID 2420, Pioneer Road sewer and water replacements. This will be within Pioneer Road from Airway Drive to Cleveland Avenue. The total project estimate is $5.3 million, currently in design, and will go to construction in year 1. Next, we have our sewer trunk category. This is the Robles trunk line project, PID 2115. This is phase 2 of our Robles trunk, and it will rehab 42-inch and 45-inch trunk sewer lines and manholes. The estimated project cost is $9.2 million, and we anticipate design in year 1 and 2 and construction in year 3. Moving on to stormwater. This is the largest expenditure in our stormwater budget this year for capital projects. This is project ID 2580, the storm drain repairs on call phase 3 project. These projects complete emergency storm drain repairs as needed throughout the city. This one specifically is a storm drain failure on Oakmont You can see in the picture there, the corrugated metal pipe that's rusted out, and is failing and, causing erosion there on the creek bank. So that'll be one of the top priorities of this year's funding. Moving on to our regional projects. This is project ID 1979, our Laguna Treatment Plant Secondary Clarifiers project. We'll rehabilitate clarifiers 1 through 3. And this project estimate is $8.9 million. It's currently in design and should go to construction in year 2. The next project is PID 544, the Laguna Treatment Plant Flood Protection Project, which will construct retaining walls and floodgates to protect the treatment plant from flooding during our peak wet weather events. The estimated project cost for this project is $21.2 million. This project is going to benefit from approximately $17 million in outside funding through FEMA grants and HUD grants, which I heard from the project manager we hope to receive in the next few months. The project is currently in design and expected to go to construction in year 1. And lastly, we have PID 2448, Geysers Pump Station Electrical Upgrade. The project will assess the condition of the Geysers pump stations, prioritize and upgrade electrical components, and develop a structured maintenance replacement schedule. The estimated project cost is $6 million. The project is underway, with work being completed in-house, and will continue over the next several years. With that, I'll hand it back to Nick to review the schedule.
Yeah, and just to fill you all in on the anticipated upcoming budget schedule, we'll be back with this group on the 18th to review the full budget package and request your recommendation to the full board. We'll have a budget study session on the 19th with the full board. We will take the regional budget and ask for the partner agency recommendation at the subtac meeting on the morning of April 2nd. Followed by later that day, we'll be bringing a report item to the board, asking for the board's recommendation of the full budget package to City Council. We'll be at Council April 21st, asking them to approve the preliminary regional budget. We do that earlier on in the process so that we can give our partner agencies their billing totals for next year so that they can take those and have them passed as part of their budgets at their respective agencies. We like to notify them by May 1st to allow that to happen. The City Council budget study sessions are scheduled to take place May 5th and 6th, and the public hearing for adoption to take place on June 16th. And with that, we're more than happy to open it up to any discussion or questions you may have.
Any questions or comments from committee members?
Yes.
Have it.
Well, first of all, thank you for a thorough presentation. I think each year these get a little bit easier to digest, and I see changes you make over time to address blank faces that you see. I appreciate that. So let me start with the one that's probably the smallest but the hardest to understand: stormwater. So a couple questions. First, preliminarily, we're funding that with both enterprise funds that come from stormwater and general fund. Now, this department doesn't have general fund, right? So
Right.
When you say general fund, you're talking about city general fund money come to us. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Stormwater's caught in this trap where they're unable, because of the laws and regulations that are currently in place, to really generate the enterprise revenues to fully support the program. So the city came in and has provided general fund support as a stopgap to make sure that we can still continue going forward. And I know that getting stormwater to a place where they can collect sufficient revenues is a large discussion, much larger than me, and involves a lot of lawyers and But it's something that I think we always have an eye to enhancing those revenues, when the opportunities present themselves in the future.
But what we're talking about is the fact that we need general fund money just to meet operations, and,
Yes.
and that doesn't provide any money for infrastructure improvement or capital, I mean, minimal numbers for doing the long-term planning that we have to do since we're responsible for maintaining the system, we need to figure out how we're gonna fund the enterprise, I mean, the infrastructure improvements that we're now responsible for doing. And so my understanding is that the laws that you're talking about are primarily the timidity of municipalities throughout California to take the position that this is a utility and can be funded with an enterprise fund of its own. And we've been waiting for the first municipality to take the dive into doing it and get sued. So I guess my question is, has anybody done it yet? Has anybody started to challenge the issue of whether or not this can be funded in the same way we fund sewage, the same way we fund water? And for some reason, there's an opinion that we can't. And I've never seen an analysis that says we can't. All I've seen is that there's people threatening to sue municipalities if they try to do it.
So, great comments for board member or vice chair, board member in this committee. So a couple things, just to give a little frame of reference. So you are correct. Prop 218 constitutional amendment, very clear, water, sewer, never mentions stormwater. So legislation a few years ago tried to clean that up. But as you know, constitutional amendment is stronger than legislation. So that is the rub where a number of entities in particular have said, no, it cannot be a utility because it wasn't designated in the Constitution proposition. And so if you go there, it's going to be challenged. My understanding is there continues to be a handful that is getting closer, but no one is quite finished. There were a couple that got pretty far and then pulled the plug and didn't do it.
Santa Barbara wasn't. I thought Santa Barbara
Redwood City was one
Redwood.
that was very close. There's different mechanisms we can look at. We've continued to have discussions. The good thing is that we do have an assessment. So we do have an outside assessment. It's very small. That is correct.
Yeah, well, that's true.
So it's better than nothing, and it gives us some, and then whatever we can get from general fund or others help supplement for us to do as much of the program as we can. You are correct in that it really is only funding meeting the regulatory requirements that we have of our MPDS permit and really not much more. We have saved up for the last couple of years, and the board will be seeing before too long our first ever storm drain master plan. And included in that master plan has information on what we believe based on best recommendations from our consultants and talking to other other municipalities or agencies that are responsible for stormwater. There's really nothing out there that says this is what you should be investing or this is what you need. So this is kind of one of the first, at least based on our looking at it, to the best of our ability, trying to determine how much we really think needs to be funded in the for the system year over year, and what that's going to look like, and what our options could be for bringing in revenue to do that. And they include exploring all the options, whether it's truly going out for a Prop 218 rate, through to looking at getting another assessment, and anything that might be in between. So you are correct. It is probably, believe it or not, which if you look at everything we have, is the system that keeps me up at night more than any other system.
Even those small dollar amounts.
Well, because it is the most underfunded and conditionally in the worst shape of any of the systems that we have.
Well, I had, like, maybe I didn't, I'd forgotten that the city was supplementing us with general fund money, and I appreciate that. I mean, without that, we wouldn't even be meeting our minimal regulatory obligations, so.
And from what I understand, and I was not here, and I don't know if that many folks still as they are here, but when that assessment went out, it was always understood that there would be general fund that would continue to invest in the system. It wasn't meant to remove general fund, it was to supplement general
Okay.
fund. Over the years, it has changed to being our main source, and general fund is supplementing when it's available. But I think, we all know, and as Deputy Director Harvey mentioned earlier, we do have direction from the interim city manager to look at reductions because we still have a deficit. So the little general fund that we do have, we're continuing to have to really scrutinize, and we are coming up with some additional reductions, but as you can see, it's a very small budget and there's not a lot of options for us there, but we have to do what we've been directed to do, and we will do it.
Well, I think it's more of a contrast for me right now, because I just last week went to the celebration of the fact that we just went for an entire year without having a single sewage overflow, which is unheard of, and was celebrated with everybody in the room. But the reason we can do that is because we have adequate funding, so that, we can nip the problems when they're in the bud and not let them mature into overflows. Well, the same cannot be said for stormwater stuff. So the first big challenge we have with the stormwater infrastructure, I hope it doesn't take a disaster to shake loose a funding mechanism, but, that's how it's looking. So I continue to be concerned that we're responsible for maintaining the system and we don't have the money to do it. That's my rant on that. The next thing I wanted to ask was what's happening, if anything, in the bond market? If we're going out for a bond next, everything I've been hearing is that municipal rates are going to start skyrocketing pretty soon. And so the timing on the interest rates on those, could be very significant.
Yeah, so that's actually a big part of why we didn't run out and go for it as soon as possible. The council banged the gavel, approved the proposed rate structure, and we didn't go out the next week looking to issue bonds because that was at a time where interest rates started ticking down. And so I talked to the CFO and, said, hey, we might want to wait on this, see if interest rates fall a little bit. And then it turns out the equipment had such a long lead time that we're going to run into that IRS
Which is a different issue.
3-year thing, which is a whole other issue.
That trumps the whole thing, yeah.
But what helps me sleep at night is that when we do go out for the bond, because we're being so strategic about timing, even if interest rates go up 50 basis points, 0.5%, 1%, I think the bigger contributing factor is the timing of the bond sale. As long as we don't issue them too early, we're not sitting there not using the proceeds and then having to pay millions of dollars in interest as debt service payments. So I think even if interest rates do tick up a little bit, I think the fact that we're being so strategic about timing, I think we'll find that we'll still be on the good side in terms of any excess we pay in interest rate change, I think would be far outstripped by the excess interest we'd be paying if we went too early. So I think, none of us has a crystal ball, of course. We have no idea what's going to happen, but all we can do is the best with the circumstances, and we'll keep you posted.
Sounds good. Last brand, reserves. First of all, I've never heard them referred to as turnbacks. I really don't like that term. Turnbacks make it look like you're obligated to give back the money to the initial appropriating body, and that's not what we're doing. We're not giving back any money. We're just, it's undesignated reserve balances, I think, are a less scary term for me.
Oh.
We can call it unspent appropriation.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, so I guess that's really all I wanted to say with that. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Any questions from you, Robin?
No.
Okay. So while we were on the bonds, we're close to the bond, I got a little confused with the bond discussion in that I thought we were putting in money to pay for the bonds in the budget. And then the next thing I heard, we're going to delay the bonds. And you didn't actually say when we're going to sell the bond because we don't have the crystal ball.
Right.
But my belief is it's not going to be this fiscal year or the fiscal year we're talking about here. And so are we appropriating fund to pay the debt but, and then not gonna take the debt, or how does that all work
So the
out?
way it works, accounting wise at the city, there's no such thing as constructive receipt, right? So until we receive the bond funding, we don't owe anybody money, and we can't budget for costs that don't yet exist. So we're not amassing funds to do that.
Okay.
We're simply just waiting to pull the trigger. And just to clarify, my inclusion of that information isn't to say that we're necessarily thinking we're gonna go this fiscal year. It's more of just a reminder to keep it on your radar, because we spent so much time talking about it in the rate setting process, and especially in the public forum at the public hearing. It was advertised as part of the rate proposal, and we just want to make it absolutely clear that hasn't fallen by the wayside. It's on our radar, and we just want to keep everybody reminded that we are doing that at some point. It is still part of the current financial plan. It's just not part of any adopted budgets just yet.
Okay, and then also like to comment, I appreciate the way we're bringing our reserves down, whatever we're calling them. I think that's a good method. I support your methodology in doing that. And then, I didn't see it exactly. What is the general fund contribution to stormwater?
$742,000 this year is what we're asking for. Now that's before we talk about any potential 1 or 3% reductions. But yeah, we're talking less than $750,000 of the entire general fund. So it's very small, which is why we say we're not sure if we're ultimately going to be beholden to that, because 1% on 700,000 is a drop in the bucket, and we're not even sure we can find it. So we'll definitely keep you posted as to how that conversation goes throughout the process.
Yeah, in those days, I was running the CIP budget in the 90s, and when Colleen Ferguson took this item to get the 218, whatever it was, now you tell me that stormwater isn't in 218, which is really confusing to me. I have all kinds of confusions here today, but
I believe I could be wrong, but my understanding of the history is we went and adopted it before Prop 218.
that's correct. The night before or something, yeah.
That we could make sure, because
Okay.
it was unclear, and there was also a lot of legal analysis over the years about whether Prop 218 actually truly applied, because it's a property-based assessment or
Yeah.
tax or whatever you want to call it. So, some utilities, water and sewer providers initially just said, well, that's not gonna apply. And then it was, yes, it does.
So before that, it was all general fund. And so stormwater just put their money in, and the city council, but also in those days, general fund had a lot more money.
Yeah.
It seems like, I don't know why we had so much more money back in the 80s and 90s than we do now in the general fund.
Inflation.
Yeah, and so how much, it's never actually spelled out, the internal overhead. How much is that up, and how much do we actually pay in internal overhead? And is that actually something you can put your hands on?
Yeah, so for water, we're budgeting $6.5 million this year. Sewer, $5.6 million. And basically we have no control over it.
Yeah, I know.
Because finance, they hire a consultant every year to perform this cost allocation plan study per GASB regulations. And so what GASB says is all central services, so all the things that live downtown, that all departments benefit from, they don't generate revenues outside of other departments, right? So every dollar of cost they incur has to be brought back to the fund through the overhead plan, or else they're insolvent, and because they don't collect any revenues like we do, or like the rest of the general fund does. And so basically what they do is every year they go through, they look at what all the central service costs were, and then like AP costs, for example, they go, oh, well, the city issued 1,000 AP payments, and 100 of those are for water. So 10% of our AP costs are going to be allocated to water. And then it's further divided to the funds. But so it's a very technical methodology. It's very dense. It's a very complex document to read, but it's essentially an uncontrollable cost to us. At the end of the day, we have no say whatsoever in that. Now, what we hope is, because the general fund did realize some savings by cutting some positions this year, that maybe the total overhead, the overhead cost pool will be slightly smaller in future years. So maybe we'll see some benefits on the back end. But right now, it's just, finance tells us what it is, and we just have to cover it. So
How much, you said that the percentage is up, how much is it up over last year?
It is 3% in the water fund, 4% in the sewer fund, and almost 6% in the regional fund.
Okay. You said it was, I thought it was gonna be worse than that, so, yeah, that's less of a concern. Okay, those are all my comments.
I had one other question I forgot. When you were talking about the fact that we were holding a flat line on I think it was water operations, we weren't adding any positions, we weren't reclassifying any positions. I guess the question I had, are there any unfilled positions, or are we completely filling all of our existing positions, or is that a bad question to ask?
Well, positions, my understanding, and Director Berg, of course, jump in, but we were previously, because of the fiscal constraints on the general fund, we were previously subject to hiring freeze, meaning that even though we're separate and apart from the general fund, other than that one sliver of stormwater, we couldn't just fill our positions, even though it wasn't going to save the general fund any money. My understanding that that's changed, and we're free to fill our positions. We have to submit a request to fill, but then they will be approved. But that being said, when we talk, that bears out in the actuals, whether or not our positions are filled, you'll see those in the actual numbers. But regardless, from a budgetary standpoint, whether a position's filled or not, we budget every dollar.
Okay.
So it's not going to make any impact from a budgetary perspective, but vacant positions are a big piece of why you see these big undesignated fund balance. These monies being added, because part of that is unfilled positions that were budgeted for and never cost us a dollar for the year. So that's part of that issue.
How long have we been under freeze? Like a year or 2 years?
Yes, been about a year, but, we've been able to get some, positions freed up over time. But we have 278, positions in the department, and we have roughly, seem to carry about somewhere between 27 and 30 vacancies. So,
But that varies, fluctuates wildly over time, so you need to have some buffer there.
yes, but it would be nice if we could get down. I mean, we're working on trying to get down even lower. We've carried as high like 50 vacancies, which can be tough. So we're getting closer. That's good.
Not all of our vacancies are caused by budget either. We just can't find people to fill them, so. Okay, I guess we have no other comments. I can close the meeting.
Public comments?
Public. Do I have a public comment? Any public comments on, or public comment?
Thank you very much for that thorough presentation. I'm familiar and interested, if I could get a copy, and I'm not even sure what I'm asking for a copy, but of your presentation, the one on Meadow Creek out in Oakmont. It's a project that you have up, but I'd just like to know the dates and like when it's going to happen, and maybe some pictures of it that came from your presentation. I don't think I can look at it on the internet, can I, or can I?
The presentation
If
should
it's-
be
if
on the
it's-
internet.
but sometimes they say it's there and it's not there, and I have to go to the specific person, so I sort of feel like since I got you here, I'm gonna ask.
If you go on to the
And I know there's
agenda,
not supposed to be back and forth, and I'm sorry, but.
yeah, but if you go onto the agenda and the presentation
I know how to do
doesn't
that. Okay.
work, you can reach out to me and my name is on the agenda, Michelle Montoya,
Okay, all
and I
right.
can help you access it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, now I can adjourn the meeting. Meeting adjourned.
Yeah.